Welcome to Where You Live on Shaw TV. Now, this is one of my favorite parts of my job. Today, we are at a brewery, and we get to talk all about beer. I'm here with John and George, and we're at Dawson Trail Brewery. Now, you guys have been open for just under 2 years. How did you come up with this idea?
Well, we've been homebrewing for a few years, and just liked it. We were growing as homebrewers. We wanted to do more equipment and more styles and more stuff. So we looked at the possibility of opening a brewery and what that would afford us as far as homebrewers, ironically, as far as equipment and being able to flex and do different stuff. And it looked like it worked, so we decided to give it a shot. So
now, why start a brewery in Thunder Bay?
Well, we think.
Well, we were both living here at the time. We're both from here, and so we have roots here and family and support. So we decided, why not do it here?
And for the longest time, we were just like, Thunder Bay needs more craft breweries.
Yeah.
Like it was, 5 or so years there was one, and we were just kind of waiting for the second one to open, and eventually we were just like, let's just do it ourselves.
So this is going to be an obvious question, but do you guys love beer?
We do.
I think
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, it depends how much beer you have on you during the day, as it kind of affects how much you like it.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously it's it's a passion, I think.
Now, did you guys get any help from any organizations in Thunder Bay to open up? Did you get any loans from anywhere?
We had a loan from Thunder Bay Ventures, so they were helpful. They gave us some advice because we were not super business people. We're not big. We don't have any BAs and whatever, so we we're homebrewers. So we got a little bit of mentorship from them, and they pushed us more in the right direction. And yeah.
So how has the community been? How has the response been from the community?
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's been pretty good. Lots of support. We see lots of support in our tap room and at all the bars and restaurants we're at. We don't do a lot of advertising, we're not out with billboards and signs, but people still get the word out, and we see that a lot. So
I'm going to ask both you guys this question. What is your favorite part? So you've been open 2 years. What's your favorite part about your experiences so far?
Drinking the beer, I guess, at the end of the day. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work that goes into every glass. So just having a glass and enjoying it is probably the best part.
There's a lot of answers for that for me. The one that comes to mind first is when someone comes into the tap room and isn't a big craft beer drinker and tries something out of their range, and when they hate it. That's my favorite. When they just get that they're trying something they'd never tried before, and they've maybe hated that one time, but eventually.
Well, see, I'm the perfect person to do these interviews because I don't know a lot about beer at all. I'm not a huge beer drinker, and I would be the one making that face probably.
Cut to B-roll or
Yeah, exactly. So this is throughout the show, we're gonna go through the beer process. We're gonna talk all about the different types of beer, what goes into beer. So keep watching. There's more to come on Where You Live on Shaw TV. Welcome back to Where You Live on Shaw TV. Today we are talking all about beer. I'm here with John and George from Dawson Trail Craft Brewery. Now, one of the things to start with beer is the ingredients and what goes into beer. So that's, I guess, what we're talking about. So what do we have in front of us?
So beer starts with 4 basic ingredients: malt, hops, water, and yeast. So we've got a couple examples here, obviously just for display purposes. The malt over here, there's kind of 3 different glasses. One is a base malt, so the base malt is responsible for all the fermentable sugars in the beer. The next one is specialty malts, which kind of do different utility and flavoring to the beers. The third one is adjuncts, so wheat and oats. Those kind of affect the body and the character of the beers.
So all of these, every beer you make, all of this stuff goes into every beer, or do you mix it up a little?
We mix it up. I mean, certain beers have different ratios of different malts. We'll find lighter beers will have larger amounts of base malt and less amounts of darker roasted malts and whatnot. We'll have more or less hops.
Now, how do you decide what goes into what beer?
You get inspired, I guess, to make a particular beer, and then start from a have a starting point. Existing styles are a good starting point.
Do a few test batches. We do little like 5-gallon homebrew size batches.
Have you ever made a really horrible batch that you both hated?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Any good examples? I can't really.
Batch number 0.
Oh yeah. Our first batch on our system didn't work out. So
Live and learn, right?
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this is what you start with. This kind of looks a bit, I said earlier, it's pellets. It looks a bit like dog food.
Yeah, like hops are a plant, and so when they're grown and to keep them longer, they pelletize them, so they look like dog food. You can get whole leaf hops, but they don't last very long. And
So this is going to be a stupid question. So hop beer, all beer has hops in it.
all beer by definition has hops in them, yes. Now, certain beers, I'd have a hard time being convinced there's hops in them, like, the larger, big, whatever, bottled draft beers that you see everywhere, anyway. That's it.
Okay, now water is the next thing, and I asked you earlier about this. Does the fact that you're using Thunder Bay water make a big difference in the brewing?
Makes a big difference, yeah. We have really nice water in Thunder Bay. It's really, really soft is the term. It doesn't have a lot of minerals. So we're lucky we can kind of choose what we want to add into each beer, mineral-wise, and that can affect the profile and how the beer tastes. If we had harder water, it'd be a lot more difficult to say, hey, we don't want as much magnesium in this beer or in this water, because we'd have to take it out, and putting it in is a lot easier than taking it out. So.
Right, because you guys are pretty small, right? So the less amount of stuff you have to do to the water I think would be a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. We'd rather spend money on making more beer and making beer better, right? Or we have a much larger wish list.
So this is the last ingredient.
This is the other yummy ingredient. This is yeast. This is a slurry, so it's like a living organism. It's probably several billion yeast cells in that glass, probably way more, actually. Someone out there's laughing at me. And yeah, if you watch this over time, it'll actually be moving, and it'll grow even sitting in this glass.
It has grown since we put it down. It's grown. So
oh yeah, it has. Wow.
Yeah. So all of this is basically what goes into beer. The different types of beer is how you mix all this together.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess there's 2 main families of beers. There's ales and lagers, and the difference between those is pretty much what yeast you use. Lager yeasts are a different species than ale yeasts, and here we just do ales right now.
Okay. Now, how do you guys know what to do?
Lots of trial and error. There's lots of good literature out there for all the different facets of brewing. Lots of good stuff online. So.
Okay, well, this is just the first process of beer making. Coming up next in the show, we're going to actually go through the processes of how to make beer. So keep watching. There's more to come on Where You Live on Shaw TV. Welcome back to Where You Live on Shaw TV. Today we are talking all about beer. I'm here with John and George from Dawson Trail Craft Brewery. Now, earlier we talked about the ingredients that go into beer. Now we're going to talk about the actual process. So we have some tanks behind us.
Yes, we have our 3 tanks. And we'll go through the process. The process is quite simple. It seems like beer and it's magical, but it's really we say if you can heat water, you can make beer. Oh. Because that's pretty much it. So the first tank is called a hot liquor tank. It's basically just a giant hot water tank. It just holds and heats hot water. So we started brew day by pumping water from this tank into the next tank, which is the mash tun. So we fill it with a specific amount of water at a specific temperature.
And you have all these things on top.
So we take our malt, which looks like this. We mill it. So we basically just crack the malt, and so the water can get at the little the insides.
So you crush that yourselves, right?
Yeah, we have a mill. We actually just got it.
Okay, exciting.
So we take this and we add it to the water, and it creates kind of like a porridge. It looks like this.
Well, you called it something, a very sweet, oatmeal-y kind of.
Sweet hot meal, or oatmeal tea, basically. So this, the water gets in and activates enzymes. I'm not big into the science of it, but it basically converts all the starch in the malt to sugar that the yeast can ferment later. So now we have a sweet tea that we want to take all the grain out. So this tank has a false bottom on it that we pump this around a bunch of times until the the solids settle and they act as kind of a filter. And then what we get out of that afterwards is a clear, hopefully with as little solids in it as possible. So basically now this is just like hot, sweet malt tea.
Okay.
It's actually quite good if you really like sweet tea. So
then what is this?
We go from the mash tun into the boil kettle. So this tank is actually very similar to the first tank, which is just a big tank with a heater in it that heats the liquid.
So from start to finish, how long does it take to actually brew a batch of beer?
To brew the beer, to brew a single batch, takes about 6 hours, and then it takes about 2.5 hours to clean up. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So now, throughout this whole process, how do you control the alcohol content?
There's two main factors. The first one being how much sugar is in your liquid. The more sugar, the more food for the yeast, and the more alcohol they'll produce. The second factor is the yeast themselves. Different strains of yeast will eat the sugar more or less than other ones. So pretty much if the yeast eat a lot of sugar and they produce a lot of alcohol, that's how you get a stronger beer.
So is more alcohol better?
That depends who you ask. Lately, I think we've been more interested in doing like lower alcohol stuff, just because if we make something that's like 8%, you have one and you feel it the next day. So
Right.
it's a preference thing. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you guys. We'll be back with more with John and George from Dawson Trail Craft Brewery on Where You Live. Welcome back to Where You Live on Shaw TV. We are here at Dawson Trail Craft Brewery, and we're talking all about beer. Our last segment, we were in the middle of the process of beer, and I'm going to let George continue with that.
Yeah, so we left off with a brew kettle full of sweet, hot wort, is what it's called. It's basically pre-fermented beer. From there, we bring the wort up to a boil, and we add hops at different times to add different flavors. Some hops right here. So we usually boil it for about an hour, and afterwards we cool it and ship it over to the fermentation tanks. So they are over here. So
And they actually look kind of cool.
yeah, they're the fancier of the tanks that we have. So the beer goes into here. We then add yeast. The yeast eat away at all the fermentable sugars and turn all the sugars into alcohol. Usually takes about 7 to 10 days, and then afterwards, it's beer at that point, but it's got lots of yeast in it. So we have cooling jackets that cool the beer really quick, and drop all the yeast out, and then it's pretty much ready to go into the fridge to be cooled and carbonated.
So you have a big fridge behind the wall. All of your beer comes out in taps. Now that's a question too, is what's the difference between draft beer and beer that you get in a growler? Is it the same thing?
Good question. There's some different definitions once you start dealing with the government. But I mean, draft beer is generally beer that hasn't been packaged at all. It's in kegs, so it's big. There's kind of a process that happens packaging beer from kegs, from bringing it from kegs into bottles. As far as like differences, I mean, the beer is pretty similar. You can get differences if you, say, bottle the beer before you carbonate it. You can you can add sugar and have any residual yeast left over to carbonate the beer. Then that kind of changes the profile and like how the beer is in the bottles. So.
Okay, so we've come from this side of the room where we add some of the ingredients. It comes over here, and it stays in here ferments here for 7 to 10 days.
7 to 10 days.
And then from here, it goes into the fridge in the back where you carbonate it.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. I've got the process.
Nice. You want to help next time?
I might come and help. Okay, so we've talked about the process. Next, we're just going to talk about a few questions just basically about beer. So keep watching. There's more to come on Where You Live on Shaw TV. Welcome back to Where You Live on Shaw TV. I'm here with George and John at Dawson Trail Craft Brewery. I think we've gone through the process, what goes into beer. We've talked about beer for a whole show. Now I just want to talk about a few questions about beer, because I have a few questions, because like I said, I don't know a lot about beer. So there's ale and lager. What's the difference?
The main difference is the yeast that's used. The ales and lagers are fermented with different species of yeast. So
all different beer styles are either ales or lagers, and then all the different styles kind of exist underneath those two categories. So just because something's an ale, like pretty much means it can be anything, and same with lager, pretty much.
Okay, now we have a few cups in front of us here, little glasses.
Yes.
Why are they all different colors, and what are they?
They're all different beers. There are 5 beers we have on tap currently. And they're different colors because they have different ingredients. They're different styles. They're all actually different styles. So this is Border Run. It's a cream ale. It's very light. It's I don't really want to get into.
Is it light tasting too? Is it because it's light color? Does that mean it's light tasting?
It is in this case, but that's not always the case. There's malts that are light that like taste like coffee, you know, and then there's malts that are dark that taste like light beers. So it's kind of all over the place, but generally the color is an indicator of, yeah, that's the word I want.
So
generally
this one
color.
Kind of looks in between, and this one looks really dark.
Yes. So yes. Funny enough, this is a red and this is a stout, and generally reds are. For the most part, you make it by using like a fraction of the ingredients that make a stout. So it's kind of actually like a gradient here. Like this is kind of half of what this is.
Okay, that makes sense.
Kind of abstract, but
Okay, so what are the names of this one? Like, what's that one?
Border Run. We have Running Stone. It's an Irish red ale. We have Outer Limits. It's an oatmeal stout. It's an oatmeal stout because it has oatmeal in it. There's actually some oatmeal over there. Which we had earlier. There's Bays Haze, which is an IPA, and then there's Winter Ale, which is a seasonal winter beer. So.
Okay. So my next question for both of you is, how do you come up with the names?
Usually over a beer. Easy answer. Usually over lots of conversations, lots of trying to narrow down what works and what doesn't. All these beers were kind of named differently, which is kind of interesting. We definitely don't have a very solid process.
No.
Usually the beer's named the night before we release it. So that's, yeah.
Okay, so you guys have been doing this for 2 years. What's your favorite part? Like, what do you love about what you're doing?
It's an interesting creative outlet. It's like unlike anything else. Just trying to express yourself through drink. It's kind of interesting.
It's kind of like the best and worst part is like putting a beer in front of somebody, or like kind of worrying / being excited about a beer, and then either it being good or bad is kind of like, I don't know.
Well, it's something you've created.
Yeah, exactly. Like it feels like you're judged by the beer, and when you're judged well, it's great, and you feel amazing. But there's always it's always the worry, right? So.
Well, thank you both so much for spending the day with us and telling us all about this. Like I said, I'm not a huge beer drinker, but I honestly want to try all these. So you've given me some inspiration to drink more beer. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks for coming. Awesome.
Thank you everyone for watching. We've been here at Dawson Trail Craft Brewery. We'll see you next time on Where You Live on Shaw TV.